Welcome, beautiful souls, to the Third Eye Nectar podcast with Wendy and Kannikha, your nectar extractors. Like the hummingbird piercing illusions and the bee illuminating the obscure, we extract nectar from transpersonal psychology, esoteric traditions, psychedelics, dreams, mythologies, earth stewardship, indigenous wisdom, and beyond. Our aim is to pollinate these nectar drops for nourishment, guidance, stewardship, and tools for self-discovery for your role on Earth and your place in the cosmos. We are back.
We are back again, indeed. And today we have a very special topic that we're going to discuss, which I think is going to be one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one too.
Yes. Yeah, so what we have today for you guys is the stories we hold in our body. That is the topic of this chat, the stories we hold in our body. Wendy, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for me personally, I start to think about our body as memory. And even like tuning into like the waters in our bodies and how it stores memory. And just being, what is it, 70, 80% of our body is made of water. And so, and not even that, it's like our own physical body that carries memory, trauma, wisdom, and this form of like epigenetics, things that have been passed down as well into this like ancestral memory, this ancestral healing, intergenerational stories. I mean, there's a lot. And so for me, it's I guess this question of like what story is like my body carrying, and it has always been a process of like deep reflection, and I think the body is always communicating with us. And I think because of how much pressure there is on society and the doing and living like in the north of the mind, we can get really like just caught up in, I mean, just like logistics, survival, and thinking about all the things that we need to do. But sometimes I think our bodies take the short end of the stick in all of that. A lot of pressure, and a lot of burnout that I see.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think about like the nervous system, and how it holds on to experiences. And sometimes in this, I feel that we may not have the right words to explain what's actually happening to our body, and that it may manifest in many different ways, whether it's in like tension or posture or chronic pain or illness. And so it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what aches is connected to what.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think it is just an excavation of our own healing and our own processes. And I think the more that we do bring attention to healing our body, I think more starts to kind of open up for us. It's like, oh, once you do a little bit, and then it's just like, oh, here's a little bit more. information for you,
Mm,
or you're now more ready
mm,
to be with. So it's like the space that opens up. So I'll pause there. It's just our body's such a storyteller of sorts. And I think you know, there's something that you had mentioned before as like the body as a storyteller. And I just love the way that you kind of put that to words.
mm. I love what you said, everything that you said, but what really struck me was that our body taking the short end or getting the short end of everything, of this whole process, of this phenomena of, all of these different kinds of stories that we store in our body. It's like this weaving, this weaver kind of an energy. It's constantly, I mean, if we just can take the mind off the fact that our body looks solid in this specific feature and just think of it as this information field that is being held together by certain forces, electromagnetic forces or other kinds of forces, but I'm guessing it's magnetic forces that are holding the information that looks like this right now. But if we take out the physical aspect and think of it as this field that is constantly weaving and unweaving and weaving and unweaving, you know, kind of like these birds that we see, this group of birds. I guess many people have seen this where they go in the sky like this in tandem and they weave and they come out and form these patterns. So we're constantly weaving and unweaving, knotting and unknotting all these stories that we've heard since we were children, like this wave that is just doing a dance, right? Like, and that dance looks like this. And I'm sure people who have been, in the psychedelics field or worked with psychedelics or even done a lot of shadow work outside psychedelics, a lot of purging, a lot of release, can see that they might have gone through a heavy ceremony or like a heavy purge or a heavy release, or even talking to a friend and having a cathartic moment where you cried and released a lot, or waking up from a dream where you've had like some kind of profound healing happen. You go look at yourself in the mirror and your facial features have changed,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
your body seems like it has lost a lot of weight, or suddenly your spine is a little bit more erect, you know, or the way you walk has changed. And it just kind of tells me the fluidity of our body to just change in like an instantaneous way because it has let go of certain information, made space, and it's rewoven into something that can accentuate your cheekbones a little bit more, or maybe, open up your eyes. Maybe your neck is a little bit more pronounced, or like the lower part of your spine connecting to your womb is more stronger. It to me, it just tells me how much the body takes the brunt of it all because it's the primary thing that's weaving and unweaving all of these stories, right? And it brings into question that what I'm realizing for now, for me personally, is that how much we are not taught the importance of our bodies, the importance
Mm.
of
Hmm.
connecting with our bodies.
Hmm.
And we are not taught how to be in a relationship, in a reciprocal relationship with the body. Because if you think about it, we're borrowing this body from the earth, in a way. It's made of earth components. And our parents created us using earth materials. And we're kind of like using this as a vehicle. And we're using oxygen, we're leaving carbon monoxide, we're like eating the light of the earth, and we're kind of excreting all of that. And so we're kind of in an intricate web of relationship with the earth, you know? So like learning about this body, I think in that depth of a way has not been really taught to us. How to live in a sustainable way with ourselves, how to live in a how to live in reciprocity with ourselves, you know, so that like, we manage the space that we're given, we manage the stories that we're given, um, and we kind of uh, use that process to, understand our relationship with the earth a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the question that was coming up for me in that was when, at what age for you did you start to like have this awareness and like build this relationship with your body?
Whoa. At what age?
Or like when
I
did that become, yeah,
when did that become prominent?
yeah,
About a year ago.
yeah.
Just about a year ago. So I would say it took me 38 years to understand the
Mm,
importance of my body, because the culture that I come from, it's very much rooted in mysticism. It's the land of yoga. So I come from India, from the southern part of India, and I grew up in a very traditional religious household. So learning about mysticism, yoga, the principles of Hinduism, the cosmovision, it's like part of my life. And one thing that's very heavily emphasized is that you have to renounce your body. You have to renounce the senses. You have to renounce the pleasures of your body to keep climbing to that state of spiritual awareness that is so coveted by everybody around the world. So I think I've been also holding that story in my body, is that in order to feel the divine, to feel the mysticism, I have to not be attached to this. I have to not be,
mm,
uh, you know, and that's the thing. So when you learn this concept in a very different way, like you take it in a different way. So the way I took it is I have to not be attached to this body, which means I have to disassociate from the sensations,
mm.
disassociate from the stories that is saying. Do I feel pain? I have to disassociate from it and just keep doing asanas or yoga or other practice to continue in my path. So it took me 38 years to get to this point where I'm really realizing everything is through the body,
Yeah.
through the soma. You used the word soma when we talked before.
Hmm. Yeah, soma, the body, somatics, I think more so like is becoming a I'm grateful now that it's like it's becoming more of a thing that people are like somatics, which is like the mind body connection, making those threads weave together, as you said, for healing, for the integration, right? Oh my gosh, so much that you've shared in that. And I feel like I've also just recently, I think in the last few years, of making these connections of like healing. Also for me, I think my connection also came from like my first injuries of my
Mm,
body.
mm,
And that's when I started to understand, like I first developed tendonitis in high school as a setter, playing volleyball. And for me, there was like this huge awareness of like, oh, there is like a repetition of movement here that's happening that's now deteriorating my wrists, my joints. And it was the the connection of physical therapy and the practices and the exercises and the intention of like, oh, I can actually physically heal my body through these exercises.
mm,
But that's when I started to know, like, I was like, oh, I really have to take care of myself. I really have to take care
mm,
because it's so, our bodies are so delicate. Life is so delicate. And so that opened up my awareness. But the awareness of like somatic psychology, of healing childhood memories, upbringing, the stories that have been passed down from parents, and what's stored in my body was like, oh, that was maybe I would say like 3 years ago. I was like, okay, the intentional way. Actually, it was really working with ayahuasca and my whole integration process. And so, and I see this beautiful tapestry behind you of the anaconda and the ayahuasca vine,
Yes.
and so for those of you that don't know about ayahuasca, but this sacred plant medicine that has been around for eons, hundreds of years, and used for healing practices, drunken by a brew. I started having these experiences in the Amazon jungle of Peru in Iquitos.
Mm.
And it's actually how Kannikha and I connected, um,
Yes.
which
We
is
have to
another,
talk about that, yes, in
yeah,
another
which is another,
podcast.
exactly. But from what you were saying about the healing of the body, so much that has to be let go of the physical to make these connections of like this ascension of spiritual wisdom. I experienced that in the jungle, doing this diet, and it was like of a lot of fasting and a lot of healing as I was releasing memories and trauma through my experiences with the intention of restoration and healing my family, my family tree, my the things, the generational things, my connecting to my ancestry. That when I started to release all of this from my body by actually purgative, by and like detoxing, I did lose a lot of weight
Mm.
in my physical body and even in my facial structures, just to what you were saying. And I was like, wow, so much that my body was holding on to emotionally, and how much lighter I felt. And so with the shape of the container of our body, I think it does shape shift at different times at our lives, right? Helping us to prepare or helping us to let go. And I think it is also like a manifestation of things. And so, yeah, just there's so much resonance to what you were saying. And I think there is a lot of the in spiritual practice, a lot of this like ascension, opening, like going up. And I think a lot of the integration is the descending back into the body to take that wisdom to walk forward, um, to make different changes throughout your day and really live your life from what you gained in those insights.
Wow. You know, when you said ascension and then descent and the integration, it just reminded me of this very popular phenomena since it's been introduced to the outside world, the Kundalini. The Kundalini awakening, the Kundalini ascent, the ascent of the serpent, you know? And it, I think throughout millennia, throughout many different cultures, people have been aspiring to awaken this life force called Kundalini and bring it up all the way to the top and experience oneness with the God. You know, that's very popular. It's been talked about. What's not talked about, I think, enough is this process in the tantric yoga. Um, it's not just about the ascent. There is a descent that should happen to bring the energy of, you know, reaching the Godhead or reaching Shiva or reaching the one consciousness, source consciousness. The process is you awaken and you bring it all the way to the top. You experience this and you bring it back down to the root.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
is the descent too. So part of this loop being complete is that it has to be complete. You bring it up, you take, and you bring it down, you know? So I just wanted to share that because it is part of this sacred practice of working with the body, is you bring that life force up and you circulate it back into your root, bring it back down to the ground. And I think that's part of living in reciprocity that I was talking about, is you use your energy, you bring the information from the top, you bring it back down and you ground it, and you provide that information back to the earth through your feet, so that every being who comes into contact with that information can benefit from it. So it is through the body, yeah, you use the body to bring it up and ascend and transcend the body, but then you bring the information back through the body and finish that cycle, a natural completion. Um, but maybe it's off topic, maybe not, I don't know.
No, I don't think at all. I mean, let me just drop in another symbol. I just was thinking of the tree of life, and right, like the rootedness, the groundedness from the underworlds. I think of that being into the body and going up into the branches, into the heavens, into the cosmos, all the way
Mhm.
up, the bridging.
Mm, absolutely, yeah. What do they call it? The axis mundi,
The axis
the
mundi. Yes.
axis mundi. Each of us are that axis mundi. Each point that we carry as human beings is that axis mundi. No, I love it. I love this topic. We talked a lot about medicinal spaces and releasing and detoxing and letting go, and how the body is actually fluid, very, very fluid. And how it changes according to the information it's releasing. It almost is as if like it's settling down in places, as things release, the fluidity of that structure also changes and it settles down to create new physical structures like bones, or muscular structure or posture and things like that. And so yeah, in a way, like, this whole thing of the soma is such a beautiful thing. I love the word Soma, because Soma in India is the name of this drink from the ancient times that is speculated that it's a psychedelic as well, that was used, in
Oh.
in the ancient times by the people who lived in India at that time, to connect with God and transcend. And it's also Soma is also called the elixir of immortality, or the nectar of immortality.
What?
So it's kind of like very beautiful that they would use that name Soma for the body as well. It just gives the importance to the body as this nectar of immortality, is as this vessel that carries the nectar of immortality, right? And the way that I also see our body, the soma, is this vessel that carries the nectar of immortality. And to me, right now, the vision that's coming to me is that this nectar of immortality is our stories, is a collection of stories. That's what stays
Mm.
immortal, right? That's what's fed into the information field. When the body disintegrates, the information still is there recorded, our stories, through our stories, the
Yeah.
information of our life. So our bodies are these vessels that carry this nectar of immortality called stories, and there's a keeper who takes care of this nectar. And the way I see it is that our soul, or our highest self, is the keeper of the highest form of our stories, because the nectar is a highest form of medicine. So this soul, or this highest self, keeps these stories. Uh, we can think of our body as the storehouse of information, of stories, a library, if you would say. And this soul, or this highest self, is the librarian, or the story keeper, or the keeper of the mysteries of our body, of our life. And it stores and organizes this information. Everything is perfectly lined up. in our library of our body, alphabetically or however you want to organize your stories. The highest self organizes it perfectly. It's all golden and shiny and, filled with light. That's the highest version of our story. That's what we're here to write and express in this earth. But what happens, what stops us from doing that is there's this trickster that is running inside the library, running around and hiding in corners, toppling books out of the shelves and creating such a mess for our soul and our highest self from
Mm,
experiencing this library. And this trickster, we can call it as the mind. It is the mind that wants to hijack the role of the story keeper, wants to covet the power of storytelling, because the mind in itself doesn't have the power to create stories, to create high frequency stories, to keep stories. It's just someone who messes around with the stories that are already written. And it just kind of pulls different books and puts together and connects things, right? So the way I see it is this mind is this uh oh, hello, Ubi, Wendy's cat. So the mind is actually coveting the power of storytelling, and it hijacks these stories that are in its purest form, and it distorts and fragments them into multiple different perspectives. And I also see that as part of the human experience, uh, you know. So I think in this point is where we bring in awareness and transformation, where we kind of allow the mind to be there, but also recognize the power of the original story keeper, the original wisdom keeper, and allow that wisdom keeper to slowly reclaim the purity of these stories. So that's the process of healing also, is that let the mind play its tricks. We're going to work with the mind, use the mind to help the the librarian, help the soul to keep the stories in an organized fashion, you know?
yeah. Oh, I love that. And for those who can't see, my cat just like ran onto my lap and he's so cozy. You can see this recording maybe on YouTube. um yeah, that's beautiful. I love the mind as the trickster and like the librarian and the body as the library. And I think how I see the connection of like these stories, for me, it kind of looks like, this emotional landscape, right? Because how we end up responding to the stories is maybe through a reaction, right? Maybe through the dysregulation of our body. And for me, I've been um, kind of studying and working with people in this way of how do we get to understand our emotions, and how do we get to understand where they go within our body. I truly believe that our body, everyone has their own unique map of their
Mhm.
body. And there are a lot of similar locations that hold certain emotions, right? Like a very common place of where anger is stored is in the jaw,
Mhm.
is in the upper shoulders, like getting tense shoulders, getting mad. Urgh. I learned from this teacher, Dr. Julie Caldwell. She had this frame of like the inner map. And so we would follow where the emotions would go so people can start to make that connection of like what they're feeling so they can come into this place of authenticity of like, oh, I'm having a response to a memory or to a story or to a trigger. And it's like, really, how do we own that experience? And it's really being honest with ourselves and like learning a language of our own body through sensation, how we experience things. Um, Another common like sadness or grief, it's like in the throat, in the heart. Like you could feel like your heart heavy, or if you're crying, it's getting like trying to get the words out, you get choked up, right? Like even like certain phrases that kind of cue to your own body. And then fear in the stomach, in the gut, like feeling like uh a knot in your stomach, or like your stomach just dropped when you hear things, or if you're scared, like maybe, or getting some news, unexpected news, feels like you get punched in the stomach, or and so and then like also like those are common areas, but then I always like to bring people to the awareness of also where, but how else does it manifest for you, right? Because people may get hints of like maybe even like in their lower back,
Mhm.
in their feet, in their hands, in the upper extremities, the fingers, or in the head, just so much that's just in the head, this headache of
Mhm.
just you're thinking so much and all of it. So then it's like, how can we make space for those emotions? And I think that piece of what you mentioned earlier too, of this like catharsis. And not always, like it's not always it's not always asking for catharsis. Sometimes it's actually asking for a lot of gentleness, a lot to be with the subtleness of the emotion, to just touch into it. And so I like to kind of see like, well, how can body-based practices help rewrite a new story? Um, Somatic therapy, working with someone to like have a guide, be that reflection for you as you
Mhm.
share your story, and then help you go into a deeper part of your body, or start to explore um, different types of shapes, or again sensations, and just traveling with it, staying with it to see what else opens up. Breath work, yoga, um, and I think
Dancing.
even, yeah, like the even the plant medicines and psychedelics too, right? Like you release a lot there and you make space for it. And I think that again, it's like, okay, you get to, now it's a time to put into practice, or um, to bring in movement, to bring in dance, really flow with the energy of where your body is trying to let go. Um, and it's not always painful, right? It's like also, how do we make space for pleasure and joy? Right. There's so much of the excavation and the healing of getting to the root of things. And it's like, okay, we get there and we let it go. And then it's just like we need something to fill it back up with.
Mhm.
Right. So I think of the sensuality, the movement, the dancing that can help nourish the body in its authentic expression.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I have so many threads floating. I'm gonna try to weave them as we speak. No, I love all the practices you talked about with the emotions being stored in different parts of the body, and how the one thing I loved what you said is that there might it certain things might be stored in certain parts of your body, but the symptoms may be arising from somewhere else,
Mhm.
so like they might not actually be connected in that way initially, but when you follow the thread you will find there is a connection between a manifested pain and then an underlying issue that is in your body. I really love that, you know
Mm.
um for example, headaches, migraines, or whatever. okay, this is the outward symptom of manifestation, but the root of it might actually be living somewhere else. Maybe it's in the liver. There's a big tense emotion stored in the liver that needs to be released. That's manifesting as headaches. So I think you said something to that effect, and I absolutely loved it. And the picture that was forming in my mind is that I wanted to go back to I went back to the librarian and I went back to the library, right? So in exploration of this emotional landscape, we're actually using the power of storytelling and traveling into the different rooms of the library. That could be the different organs or the different body parts, right? And if you go into a specific room, let's say the room of the throat, we might find these different books that have these different stories that has been written for the throat, like that's sitting and stored in the room of the throat. So when we go with the librarian, we're kind of following that thread and we're taking this book out, and that book actually tells a story. And that story is probably related to something that happened when we were, let's say, 16, and we're reading that story, and as we read it, a lot of emotions are coming out, and we're feeling the pain in different parts of the body, right? And we're reaching the end of the book, and it's not an end, like the story continues, but the book ends there, and it says, arrow, 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 follow this arrow and go to the room of the gut and go to the shelf A and pick volume 152. So now from the throat, you're following this thread, holding the librarian's hand and going to the room of the gut and picking up this volume 152. And now you read more stories of this particular emotion, and you're reading the end of the book until the end of the book, and more emotions come out and release. And so what's happening is sometimes these books, they come with instructions saying, follow this to the next room and this shelf. Some of them will say, you've read this book, burn the whole thing, make space, and sit and write a new book and put it in that space. Sometimes some of these books, you take it out, the first page itself will say, close the book and put it in the burn pile. You don't even need to read it. Just by burning it, you will have catharsis. So it's like you don't need to go through the whole story all the time to make space in your body.
Mm.
And I know we had this conversation where we talked about the power of prayer, the power of intention, and how that prayer and that intention itself can lead to catharsis without even knowing the whole story. And I've learned that in my process,
Mm.
like sometimes I need to go through the story, through that whole mythology to release certain things. And sometimes I don't even need to know the story at all. All I need to know is that there's an emotion coming up and I can release it through these modalities that you mentioned, dancing or moving with it or flowing in some way like yoga or asana. And I feel like that's where our ancestors who lived in a very shamanistic and animistic community had it quite right because, you know, leading us into the library, leading us to the guardian of the library, it takes uh like we could say a guide or a psychopomp or a shaman to bring us into the library itself, to bring us into the different rooms of the
Yeah.
library.
Mhm.
And in a way, our ancestors knew how to do that by using rhythms, by drumming, by allowing us to dance, to take us
Mm.
into these trance modes, to into these altered states of consciousness through imagination, through the power of concentration, and singing in harmony with all these instruments, that mimic nature. These instruments that they used in it's still they use in the shamanistic cultures, they mimic nature. The chakapa that's made with the leaves, it's made to mimic the wind. the rattles, and even the singing is at one with nature. So I think they got it right in knowing how to guide us into the Soma, into the mysteries of the Soma, into these emotional landscapes, through chant, through drumming, through dance. And I feel like those modalities can be extremely, extremely useful in allowing us to reach those states of catharsis. But like you said, catharsis doesn't really have to be painful all the time, you know. Um, it can be very ecstatic. And ecstasy, I've found that ecstasy can happen to me personally, even through tears of relief, tears of grief, tears of like loss, tears of joy, tears of just like feeling that oneness and connection with the divine. So that states of ecstasy, different frequencies and levels of ecstasy that we can jump and play with, I think will get us back into our bodies, like you said. And, you mentioned sensuality. That is something I think it requires its own
Yeah,
little, little podcast
totally.
episode. Yeah.
Thank you for the weaving and the painting of a beautiful picture. Yeah, I think like as you were sharing, the librarian going to a certain to a certain story or to a certain book of of the body. That one really, it yeah, we have so many stories, so many books within the library. And there was something there was something in that for me. It's like I I think about so the liver, and this is in like Chinese medicine. The liver like can store anger. The emotion of anger gets stored there, and the liver is like also connected to the eyes too. And and then the gallbladder is also connected to the liver. And I had a quite an experience when my gallbladder started to fail with gallstones, and I had not befriended anger quite yet, but that journey took me into a lot of memory of upbringing, of like just of like why I was angry. And I received a dream of that really related to the connection of the myth of Prometheus. And in the story of Prometheus, um, he was actually punished by Zeus because he stole fire from the gods to give to humans because he really appreciated and adored humans. And Zeus chains him to a rock, Prometheus to a rock, and a vulture would come pick at his liver where it would die every night, and he would be like reborn in that moment. And in the dreamscape, I was flying in the sky over the jungle, and I look back and I was having like all of these aches and pains in my back. I look back and there's a condor picking at my back. And I fly down to the maestras and I tell them what happened. And they said, remember the bite of the condor. Welcome to the center. It's time to sit. And I was like, whoa. Fast forward 6 months later, I had to go to the emergency room. I was having pains in my back, and I told the nurses my symptoms. And they said, oh, those are signs of gallstones. and I got treated, and I went in to get checked up, and they're like, yeah, you have many gallstones, and your gallbladder is failing. And so it and through that whole process in the hospital, I was like, whoa, I remembered my dream.
Mhm.
And I remembered the condor in my back. And it wasn't until later where someone had shared the story of Prometheus with me, which kind of comes into this more collective unconscious with the stories. But my body, I feel, was warning me. And it came through a dream space to say, remember this.
Mhm.
And I had to go through this whole process of like anger and some catharsis with that. But all to say, like, I feel like our body is always communicating with us, always signaling with us that something isn't right or something needs, and pay attention. Hey, pay attention to me. So things kind of start to manifest within the body, and we have an illness or we feel sick. And so again, it's like, okay, how can we take care of ourselves more and more and listen to those smaller cues?
Wow, thank you for sharing the story of your journey, with your gallstones and gallbladder and and how that parallels with the myth of Prometheus. And that's why I love the storytelling aspect so much because, you know, it just highlights how much power we have to weave our own stories, to reclaim our own true stories from our mind, free them from the clutches of our mind and actually take ownership of our own stories, to write our own stories. Because, you know, um, I like to see the mind as a ghostwriter who's actually writing for the real author. Um, and the real author is just kind of putting their name at the end, having not written any of the stories themselves. So I think it's time to let the role of the ghostwriter of the mind, to allow that role to just be rested and, give back the power to our soul, give back the power to our highest self to write the stories and take that power back. And I think it's part of the sovereignty process as well, of walking a path of, let's say, spirituality, reclaiming back your wild self, reclaiming your sovereignty, reclaiming your freedom, reclaiming your liberation. It's just asking us to
Mm.
become authors of our own stories. And by becoming authors of our own stories, we're not only writing our own personal, like, cosmology, personal mythology, we're also doing that in relation with the whole, with the collective, with the stories that are already hanging in the ether, that
Yes.
tells the stories of humanity from long, long time ago to the present. So we are weaving a new narrative, a new story for ourselves, but we are also moving that story in tandem with the stories that already exist, you know? Um,
Mm.
so I think, um, for me personally, seeing this work that I'm doing with my body, with my soma, with my emotional landscape in relation to story writing, story keeping, story retrieving, taking back the power of my personal mythology and cosmology, it works really well because it brings the magic back to me. It reanimates me from within, understanding that yeah, I am working through many of these lenses, and most of the lenses that I read and work through are very much like logic based or intellectual based or scientific based. By bringing the reanimation, or like by bringing the process of animation and magic and enchantment into this process, uh, it makes me feel like I'm integrating the right and the left brains uh to work with my body, you know? That's my process, is like
Mm.
bringing the right brain and the feminine together. I mean, bringing the masculine and the right brain. Am I saying that right? No, bringing the masculine and the left brain in tandem with the right brain and the feminine. So it's the mystic and the scientist coming together through this process of like stories and mythology and cosmology. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love this, and I feel like there's another episode to continue on like the storytelling and the mythos and our own personal cosmologies. I love how you put that together because it's true. There's a lot of things that uniquely guide and like show up in each person, right? Whether they're seeking out or archetypal guidance. And so I think as a kind of like a closing reflection, I have this question of like what's one story your body is asking you to pay attention to right now? And that could also be for everyone listening, right? What is that story?
Mhm.
How does it show up in your body? What does that part of your body signaling or saying to you?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great practice, you know, for whoever's listening. I highly encourage you to try out Wendy's suggestion. And, you know, if it helps, maybe you could also do a self-guided imagination aided exercise by just, you know, maybe just sitting in your chair or wherever you're at in meditation, contemplation, or you know, however you'd like to dream, just go into that like dream space or daydreaming space and access probably the library of your body and allow it to take you into a specific room and allow it to show you a story, a book that has a story. And what is it telling you? You know, bring that book back and, you know, um, what is that book trying to tell you? What is the story it's trying to tell you? Which part of your body is it located in? Um, yeah, I think that would be a fun one. Maybe we could do a guided meditation, Wendy.
Oh, I love that. We should do that, definitely.
Yeah, we should probably, maybe we can record like a little guided meditation exercise or something, um, as a
Yeah,
follow-up for this podcast episode.
yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that.
Is there any other practice you'd like to suggest? Getting in touch with our Soma?
Yeah, there one recently that I've kind of been also playing with is just at any time of day, really, is just like a little check-in. How can you just like really check in with your body? We get caught up, right? Just doing all the things. It's like, how is our body feeling? Don't really need to put words to it, but um like I think right now my body feels a lot different coming towards the end of the podcast. Although like this morning, like I felt like a little tired, so my shoulders were kind of drooping in forward and but now I'm feeling like my posture's changed and my shoulders are kind of pulled back. I'm noticing I'm sitting a little taller just by the energy of the podcast. And so the exercise is allow your body to take shape of where
Mm-hmm.
you are in that moment. Whether you want to crouch down, whether you want to put your hands to your face, whether you're feeling really good and you're standing really tall, your arms are out. Just let your body take that shape. And then what would your body like to feel like by the end of the day? Whether it's more restored or relaxed or relieved. There's a lot of R words here, but what would you like to feel at the end of the day? And take that shape. And then how can you move with your body from the previous shape and kind of choreograph certain movements, whether micro or macro movements for your body to get ready to that ending shape. It's like what story does your body need to physically express to get to where you want to feel like?
So many powerful practices here. Uh, my personal favorite is do a check-in with your body multiple times because I don't usually do that. And it's such a great reminder. And I'm going to try to do that this whole week. And I will let Wendy know how I feel.
Yes.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful conversation, Wendy. I feel excellent. How are you feeling in your body?
Yeah, I'm feeling like nectar.
Oh,
Like this gooey, moving slow, but then it kind of like speeds up in my shoulders. I feel good.
love that. Love that. Yeah, a train of nectar flowing through. Amazing. Yeah, I feel great. I feel really nice in my body. It feels like I've really nourished myself through this conversation. So I hope all the listeners are feeling nourished and filled with a lot of nectar drops throughout this conversation. But yeah, we are looking forward to another topic next week for all of you who are listening. So we just want to wish everybody an incredible day. And I also want to set a prayer that uh, may our conversation and all the benefits that arise from this conversation be dedicated to the greatest good of everything.
Thank you so much, Kannikha. This was such a joy and a sweet one. Thank you everyone for listening and excited to share more and to be attuned to everyone who's tuning in.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, nectarines! We enjoyed this nectar extraction, and if you found this helpful and valuable, please subscribe and drop us a comment. Be the first to listen when new episodes are released. If you know of anyone who would enjoy vibing out with us, please share this nectar with them. We love you and catch you in the next nectar drop.